Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon, a day ahead of the two Korea's first war-separated family reunions in 3 years. South Korean family members are set to gather near the border today for last-minute preparations. More than 20 people, including several police officers, have been killed in the Ukrainian capital Kiev as protesters and security forces clash in the worst violence in weeks. Plus, Korea's short-track speed skating team wins gold in the women's 3,000-meter relay in Sochi. Team Korea now stands 15th in the overall medal rankings. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Choi Yusan in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. We start with what promises to be a very emotional week for scores of Korean families on both sides of the border. More than 80 elderly South Koreans will have the chance to see their loved ones for the first time in over 60 years, as the two Koreas are about to hold some very long overdue family reunions. And
one day ahead of the much anticipated event, South Korean family members are set to gather near the border later today for last-minute preparations. Our Hwang Sung-hee takes us there and through the first round of the 6-day event.
War-separated family members from the two Koreas will meet with their loved ones Thursday for the first time in over 6 decades. The reunion event for families separated since the Korean War, the first in more than 3 years, will take place from February 20th through the 25th at North Korea's Mount Kumgang. 83 South Korean divided family members will gather in Sokcho, Gangwon-do province on Wednesday and spend a night there before crossing the inter-Korean border on Thursday morning. The elderly participants, most in their 80s and some in their 90s, will undergo a simple health checkup the night before their departure and receive instructions about how to conduct themselves in the communist states. On Thursday, they will travel by bus to the Mount Kumgang Resort, the site of the reunions. Here, the South Korean family members will be joined by 180 North Korean participants for the first round of reunions that runs for 3 days. The event will be composed of 6 total meetings, with the first 5 lasting for 2 hours each. The final meeting on Saturday will last just 1 hour. If the reunion event goes as planned, the separated family members have only 11 hours to make up for lost time. Millions of Koreans were separated from their families during the Korean War, and around 70,000 registered divided family members in the South are waiting to reunite with their long-lost relatives. With no telephone or letter exchanges allowed between citizens of the two Koreas, the occasional government-arranged reunions are the only chance they have. The humanitarian event is also an important barometer of inter-Korean relations. Just last September, the North called off a round of reunions amid heightening tensions on the Korean peninsula, disappointing hundreds of divided families on both sides of the border. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
The White House has reiterated its condemnation of the human rights violations in North Korea in light of a new report by a UN panel. In a press briefing Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Carney said the U.S. is extremely vocal and critical about the appalling conduct of the regime. The latest UN panel report on the human rights situation in the North defined rights abuses there as crimes against humanity. In contrast to the U.S. reaction, Beijing, Pyongyang's ally, said the UN's criticisms were unreasonable. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also denied claims Beijing may be abetting Pyongyang by forcibly repatriating North Koreans trying to flee their country, saying they're considered illegal migrants. Concerns are rising again here in Korea about Japan's claims to Korea's Dokdo Island after it was found a U.S. congressional think tank uses both the Korean and Japanese names for the rocky island. Our Sun Jung-in reports.
The discovery that a U.S. governmental body has been using 2 names on official maps has reignited concern in Korea over the Dokdo Island, which Korea controls. Japan also claims the island as its territory and has said in the past it will take the matter to the International Court of Justice. This is a map of the Korean peninsula that was published last Saturday in a report released by the U.S. Congressional Research Service titled North Korea, U.S. Relations, Nuclear Diplomacy, and Internal Situation. The second page of the report shows the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island, which are referred to by two names, Dokdo, the name Korea uses, and Takeshima, the name Japan uses. The Research Bureau also used both names on reports released in April and September last year. And in a report it published last August, it referred to Dokdo as the Liancourt Rocks, with the name Takeshima in front of the name Dokdo. National Geographic also uses both names for the island on a map on its website. In related news, the Director General of the Korean Foreign Ministry's Northeast Asian Affairs Bureau, Lee Sang-deok, told his visiting Japanese counterpart Junichi Ihara on Tuesday that Tokyo's misunderstanding of history and provocative remarks are hampering bilateral ties. Lee also urged Tokyo to cancel its upcoming Takeshima Day this weekend, designed to promote Japan's claim to Dokdo. 손정인, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye sat down for talks with U.S. lawmakers on Tuesday and used the opportunity to highlight unresolved issues surrounding Japan's use of sex slaves during World War II. Meeting a group led by U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Ed Royce, the president said just 55 of Korea's sexual slavery victims, better known as comfort women, remain alive today. President Park thanked Royce for taking the lead in Congress in support of Korea's efforts to resolve historical issues with Japan and for visiting a Comfort Women Memorial in Glendale, California. Representative Royce expressed support for President Park's vision for reunification with North Korea, saying it would pave the way to provide new opportunities for the North Korean people.
Korea is stepping up efforts toward joining the US-led Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations by holding a series of preliminary talks with related parties. An official from Seoul's Trade Ministry said Wednesday that Korea and Japan will hold bilateral talks as early next month in Japan to check conditions for joining the trade pact. The TPP is an effort by the US to increase its economic presence in the Asia-Pacific region. Negotiations for the trade deal involve 12 countries at the present time. Since expressing its interest in joining the TPP late last year, Korea has already held preliminary bilateral talks with the 11 other nations, including Australia, Canada, and the US. The Korean government is rushing to re-engage economically with Iran by giving local firms the green light to engage in business-to-business transactions of humanitarian goods with the Middle Eastern country. Korea's finance ministry says the move will increase the bilateral trade volume by up to $1 billion over the next 12 months. This comes as economic sanctions imposed on Tehran by the international community were partially lifted for 6 months in mid-January after the Iranian government agreed to an interim deal to curb its nuclear activities. Back here in South Korea, and rules for financial companies concerning the collection of personal information will become stricter beginning in April. In the wake of last month's massive data leak, financial authorities said on Wednesday the Financial Supervisory Service and the Financial Services Commission will announce comprehensive measures on February 28th. The reforms will focus on what financial firms can and cannot ask new clients when they fill out application forms. The companies will be limited from asking for resident registration numbers online and offline, and will have to enlarge the font size on the sheets to make them clearer to customers. New clients will also have to sign or grant approval to the financial firm when divulging their personal information. The Islamist militant group responsible for Sunday's bus bombing in northeastern Egypt that killed 4 people, including 3 Koreans, has warned all tourists to leave the Sinai Peninsula by Thursday or risk being subject to further attacks. Kim Yeon-bin reports.
The Egyptian government says it is doing all it can to protect tourists in the wake of a threat by an al-Qaeda-linked Islamist militant group for all tourists to leave the country by Thursday or be subject to further attacks. The government said it is not sure of the authenticity of the threat posted on a Twitter account affiliated with the group, but said it has taken extra precautions. Egyptian Prime Minister Hassan al-Bolkiah said on state television that the group Ansar Beit al-Maqdis is becoming a threat to foreign tourists in the country. The Islamist group claims to be responsible for the suicide attack on Sunday that killed 4 people, including 3 Koreans and an Egyptian. The Korean government has issued a travel warning for the Sinai Peninsula and is working to find out whether there are still any Korean tourists in the region. The Korean Foreign Ministry says it is doing all it can to uncover the motive for the attack.
We are working with the Egyptian government and the international community to learn the reasons behind the attack.
Korean government officials dispatched to the scene after the attack are currently working to help the 15 Koreans who survived the attack and ensure they get home safely. The survivors and their families are scheduled to return home Wednesday. The bodies of the 3 victims will be conveyed by family members back to Korea at a later date. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
For your fill of Korean and international news. Join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
Violence has returned to Ukraine, where at least 21 people have been killed during clashes between anti-government protesters and riot police in the capital, Kiev. It's by far the worst violence seen in the city since the mass protests erupted over Kiev's withdrawal from a trade deal with the EU 3 months ago. Our Shin Se-min reports.
The capital of Ukraine is as bloody as it can get. Clashes between riot police and protesters have resulted in the deaths of at least 21 people, including 7 riot police, and the worst outbreak of violence since demonstrations erupted against President Viktor Yanukovych 12 weeks ago. Ukrainian police charged protesters at the capital's Independence Square using rubber bullets, smoke, and stun grenades on protesters and clashed with civilians on the barricades surrounding the central Kyiv square. Earlier Tuesday, the authorities had set protesters an early evening deadline that ended hours ago to end street disorder or face, quote, tough measures. The demonstrators responded by throwing petrol bombs, fireworks, and stones at police. Opposition leader Vitaly Klitschko, who met Yanukovych for emergency talks, had told women and children to quit the encampment and leave the central square, but he urged some 25,000 protesters to defend the camp, saying that they were there to stay. Tuesday's clashes began after the demonstrators attempted to march on parliament demanding constitutional reform.
Unfortunately, there seems to be no progress being made regarding the matter. We have proposed constitutional amendment, which hasn't even submitted the reform.
President Yanukovych is expected to address the nation after his meeting with opposition leaders, but an exact time has not been announced. The international community has called on both sides to show restraint, with the U.S. saying it was appalled by the violence. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Over in Thailand, at least 4 people were killed and dozens injured on Tuesday as police began forcing anti-government demonstrators out of protest sites in the capital, Bangkok. Officials say 1 police officer was killed and several others seriously injured by a grenade thought to be thrown by protesters. While claiming they were targeted by snipers, police officers also fired live rounds, reclaiming the first of 5 sites from protesters. Authorities are trying to retake official sites that have been blocked by demonstrators since protests against Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawat's government broke out in November of last year. Chinese President Xi Jinping said he respects Taiwan's social system and lifestyle in a meeting with a former vice president of Taiwan on Tuesday. The meeting between the Chinese president and Taiwan's former vice president Lien Chen, who is now the honorary chairman of Taiwan's Kuomintang party, follows another round of government-level talks between the 2 countries last week when they agreed to create a permanent communication body. During the meeting on Tuesday, President Xi also said the 2 sides should foster a common understanding of the One China principle, which says there can only be one state called China. The former vice president echoed Xi's remarks, saying cross-strait communications should be conducted under the One China principle.
Now, there's never a shortage of art to enjoy in Seoul, and this week is no exception. From traditional modern craft works to the private collection of a former American soldier who was stationed here on the peninsula during the Korean War, our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won reports.
At Culture Station 284 in central Seoul, a former train station turned art gallery, more than 360 pieces of traditional and modern Korean craft works by some 100 artists are now on display. They include traditional craft art pieces by late Korean masters, such as lacquerware inlaid with mother of pearl, as well as contemporary pieces like collaborative craft works that incorporate elements of light art and installation art.
Korea's craft arts have many sub-areas, from textiles and wood to metalworks. My work is based on intense sewing by hand, which is the groundwork of any textile craft.
The exhibition is free of charge and will be open through March 9th, except on Mondays. The highlights of a private Korean art collection are currently on display in Seoul, 1 month ahead of a Korean art sale scheduled for March at Christie's in New York. The auction will mostly focus on the collection of Robert Moore, one of the most well-known Western collectors of Korean art. He's in Korea this week to show about a dozen pieces from his 135-item collection. Since his first visit to Korea as a soldier in the 1950s, Moore started collecting antique Korean art pieces from porcelain jars to folding screens. He says it's the unique features of Korean art that have drawn him in.
Natural, spontaneous, and made to be used by everybody, including the court and the most humble people. They can be very good or they can be just ordinary things, but the very good things, as you see in this gallery, are special, and that's what attracted me, and that's why I've been devoted to it.
The Seoul preview will continue until Wednesday at 신세계 Gallery in central Seoul. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, with just 5 days remaining until the curtain comes down on the Sochi Winter Olympics, more and more attention is being drawn to the next Winter Games, which will take place in the Korean resort town of Pyongyang. For fans wanting to learn more about the next host city, there is a special place at the Olympic Park in Sochi. To get a preview, our Olympics correspondent Song Ji-sun filed this report from Sochi.
The spirit of the Olympics is alive and well in Sochi. But just a few minutes after entering Olympic Park, you can also get a sense of what the 2018 Winter Games will be like.
The Pyongyang House is just before the main competition venues at the Olympic Park. Athletes and sports fans can get a preview of what the Winter Olympics will look like at Korea's Alpine City less than 4 years from now.
From learning about Pyeongchang's location on the Korean peninsula and experiencing Korean medicine to watching cultural performances every day, visitors can get a better idea of the host city and the nation of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. The venue is especially popular among Russians who are curious about the city that will take the reins in 4 years.
I think that it will be good Olympic Games and maybe better than now. I hope that I will be in these Olympic Games in Pyeongchang.
And it's not too early to think about Pyeongchang. Athletes who have already wrapped up their games at Sochi are now setting their sights on Pyeongchang, and so are their families.
We're parents of an athlete at these games, and I'm very, very impressed. I mean, obviously, they're quite ready for the Olympics. There's no question about that.
After hitting the 100,000 visitor mark on Saturday, Pyeongchang House is rising as a must-see spot among Olympic fans.
Over 15,000 visitors drop by at the Pyeongchang House a day, meaning 1 out of 5 people in Olympic Park drop by. They get surprisingly interested after viewing the exhibition. And more than 500 Russians have already requested that they'd love to volunteer at the 2018 Pyeongchang Games.
Visitor number 201,800 to the Pyeongchang House, or 2018 with 2 zeros on the end, will win a free flight to and from the Games if the winner wants to volunteer at the 2018 Games. 송지선, Arirang News, Sochi.
And a Golden Wednesday to you all as we kick off our Sochi coverage with the latest gold medal finish by the South Korean women's short track team during the 3,000-meter relay final on Tuesday. Now, it might have taken 11 days for the first short track gold, but the wait made it sweeter. With the team consisting of Shim Seok-ki, Park Seung-hee, Kim Ha-rang, and Cho Hae-ri in the finals, they overcame an illegal block from a Chinese skater with 2 laps left as Shim Seok-ki raced to the finish line to claim the gold medal, as they finished the race with a final time of 4 minutes, 9.49 seconds. Now, Kong Sang-jung, who raced in the place of Kim Ha-rang in the semifinals, joined them in the podium as well, as Korea claims their first relay gold in 8 years and their 5th in 7 Olympics so far. And now moving on to the men's 10,000-meter speed skating event, where Lee Seung-hoon went to the race trying to defend his title, but in the end, he fell just short. And just like the 5,000-meter event, fatigue hits the South Korean speed skater late in the race as he drops down to 4th place after coming in at a final time of 13 minutes, 11.68 seconds. And once again, the Netherlands proved to be the powerhouse in the sport as 3 Dutch skaters finished on the podium, including Jory Bergsma, who finished with a new Olympic record time of 12 minutes, 44.45 seconds for the gold, followed by Sven Kramer and Bob De Jong. And now today marks the 12th day since the competitions kicked off in the Sochi Winter Olympics. And on day 12, not just for the Korean fans, but for fans worldwide, they'll finally get to see Kim Hyun-ah defend her title in the women's figure skating event. Now with the event kicking off at 7 p.m. Sochi time, fans in Korea might be up at midnight to catch Kim Hyun-ah competing the short program as she's set to go 5th in Group 3. And with Kim Hyun-ah looking to add a 2nd consecutive gold medal in the event, fans will have to wait until 9:24 p.m. Sochi time or 2:24 a.m. Thursday morning Korea time. And finally, let's take a look at the current medal count after 11 days of competition at the Sochi Winter Games. Of course, taking a look here, we see that Germany is still on top with 8 gold medals, and Norway up there now with 2nd with 7 gold medals, but Netherlands flying high with 6 gold medals. Now, Russia drops down to 5th after a day, and Korea moves up a few spots to 15th overall with 2 gold medals in Sochi. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
And time now to get an update on the weather forecast with our Jian standing by at the Weather Center. Hello there, Jian.
Hello, Mark and Yusan, and good afternoon to all our viewers. Well, according to traditional calendars in East Asian countries, today is Usu, which marks a day when spring rains start to fall. And it does feel like spring is in the air lately in most places, that is, because Gangwon-do and other areas in the east are getting more snow than rain these days. But they will also get a short break from snow today, but there's more snow in the forecast for the area tomorrow, while the rest of the country can expect a sunny day with weather similar to yesterday's. And the KMA announced that there will not be any more dramatic drop in temperatures, so spring is definitely around the corner. And in Sochi, where the Winter Games are in full swing, it will be mostly sunny with passing clouds and a high of 11 degrees Celsius. And now let's go back to the readings for Korea. The afternoon high in Seoul and Gwangju will be 5 and 8 respectively, while Daegu will see a high of 6, while Busan will top out at 7 this afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will climb up to 6. Daejeon will top out at 7, while the top temperature on Mount Keungang will be at -7. Now that's all for me today, and let's send it back to Mark and Yusan in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jian, for the weather there. And those are the stories we're following on this Wednesday lunchtime.
Join us again tomorrow for Newsline at noon.